There is a town on the Texas line where the doors still hang open. A motel with no guests, a cafe with no tables, a street with no cars, and no one left to drive them. It was alive once. Families slept here, travelers ate here, and then in a single decade, every one of them left and never came back. This is not the only one. Across 2,000 miles of America, there is a whole chain of these places, a copper town clinging to a mountainside that once held 15,000 people and now holds a few hundred, a village cut clean in half and abandoned on both sides, a gas pump standing alone in the desert, waiting for traffic that stopped coming 50 years ago. They all died the same way, and they all died along the same road. It was the most famous highway in the world. We called it the Mother Road. For 50 years it carried a nation west, and then, almost overnight, we let it disappear and let its towns go silent behind it. This is the story of what got left behind. The forgotten towns, the emptied copper mines, and the scenic drives that almost nobody takes anymore. To understand how those towns went silent, you have to understand the road that made them, and then unmade them. And here is the first surprise. The Route 66 you can drive today is not really one road. It is the ghost of several. When the highway was commissioned on the 11th of November, 1926, it stitched together roads that already existed. Some were paved, most were gravel, or simply dirt. Over the decades that followed, engineers straightened it, moved it, and rebuilt it again and again. The road was always changing shape beneath the wheels of the people driving it. It ran for 2,448 miles, and it crossed 8 states: Illinois, Missouri, a thin sliver of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and finally California. For a generation, it was the great artery of the American West. During the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s, it became the escape route for farming families fleeing the ruined plains. The novelist John Steinbeck gave it the name that stuck. He called it the Mother Road. But every road has an enemy, and this one's enemy was a better road. In the 1950s, the nation began building the interstate highway system. Wide, fast, designed to carry traffic past towns instead of through them. One by one, the interstate swallowed the old route or simply bypassed it. And in 1985, after 59 years, Route 66 was officially decommissioned. It was wiped from the map. This is the moment the towns we just saw were sentenced. Because a town on a highway lives on the strangers it brings. Cut the highway, and you cut the strangers. The towns that had lived on the road's traffic did not die all at once. They died the way a fire goes out, slowly, then all at once. What remains is a broken chain of pavement, scattered across half a continent. The famous links are polished and busy, but the forgotten ones, the long empty miles between the postcards, hold the truest version of the story. To find them, you have to leave the famous stops behind and drive the empty miles between. And that journey begins where the road itself began, at the edge of a great cold lake, where the streets of a city give way to the widest, flattest land in America. The road begins in a city, but it does not stay one for long. From the shore of Lake Michigan in Chicago, the route turned its back on the skyline and headed southwest into the flattest land in America. Through Joliet, through Pontiac and Bloomington, through a string of farm towns laid out like beads on a string, each one built around a grain elevator and a railway. This is the prairie, land so level that the horizon seems to curve away from you. To the early drivers used to mud and ruts, Illinois felt like a miracle. It was the first state to pave its entire length of the route. While much of America's Route 66 was still gravel, Illinois drivers rolled on smooth concrete. Some of that original concrete still survives. In quiet places off the interstate, you can find narrow ribbons of road, barely wide enough for two cars, sometimes laid in brick. These are the oldest bones of the Mother Road, and farm fields have grown up to their very edges, and then the land begins to tilt toward the great river. At St. Louis, the route had to cross the Mississippi. Over the years, it used different bridges, the McKinley, and later the elegant Chain of Rocks Bridge with its strange bend in the middle, built to let river barges pass beneath. Today, that bridge carries no cars. It is a footpath, suspended over the moving water, an empty monument to all the traffic that once thundered across it. Beyond the river, the flatness ends. The land starts to rise and fold. The soil turns rocky. The prairie is behind us now, and ahead lies a far older country, a worn-down range of hills that was already ancient when the dinosaurs walked. To stand on this old brick roadbed, with the corn closing in on either side, is to feel how completely the prairie has reclaimed what was once the busiest road in America. But ahead, the flat land breaks apart, and the road climbs into older country, a worn range of hills that was ancient before the first wheel ever turned. In Missouri, the road enters the Ozarks, and here the landscape itself is telling a story far older than any road. These hills are not young mountains. They are the eroded stumps of an ancient highland, a plateau of limestone and dolomite, worn down over hundreds of millions of years. Rivers have carved through the soft rock, opening caves and springs and hollows. The early travelers passed roadside caverns turned into tourist stops, and watering holes promising cold water to overheating engines. Missouri also carried the road through Springfield, often called the birthplace of Route 66, because it was here, in a 1926 telegram, that the highway's famous number was first agreed upon, a number that would become one of the most recognized in the world. And then comes one of the strangest stretches of the entire journey, because for just 13 miles, the mother road slips across the corner of a different state entirely. Kansas, the shortest leg of the whole route, so short that a traveler doing 70 on the interstate would cross it in under 15 minutes and never know it had been there. Almost nobody stops. But this tiny sliver holds 3 real towns: Galena, Riverton, Baxter Springs. Galena was once a roaring lead and zinc mining town, its ground hollowed out beneath it, its main street alive with miners' wages. When the ore ran out, the boom went quiet. Today the old mining headframes stand against the sky like skeletons, and a single restored service station marks the road where thousands once passed. This is the pattern we will see again and again. A town built on something pulled from the ground, a road that brought the world to its door, and then the slow silence when both the ore and the traffic disappeared. To stand in Galena now, beneath the rusting bones of the headframes, is to understand the whole road's pattern in a single town. But this was only 13 miles. Just ahead waits the state that holds more of this road, and more of its ghosts, than any other place in America. No state holds more of Route 66 than Oklahoma. More surviving miles of the original road run here than anywhere else along its length, and that means Oklahoma also holds more of its ghosts. This was always road country. The route runs for hundreds of miles across rolling red earth, past oil derricks and cattle land, through towns that were born from the highway and lived entirely on the strangers it brought. For a while it worked. Travelers needed gas, food, and a bed every few hours, so the towns gave them all 3. Filling stations, diners, neon-lit motor courts. An entire roadside economy bloomed in the middle of nowhere, fed by the endless river of cars. Then the interstate came, and the river dried up. Consider the small town of Texela, right on the Oklahoma-Texas line. Once it had stores, a school, a jail. Today its population can be counted on 2 hands. Crumbling buildings line the old road, and a hand-painted sign offers a strange kind of welcome. There is no other place like this place anywhere near this place, it reads, so this must be the place. Nearby Eric still has residents, but its main street feels frozen, full of empty storefronts and silence. And in places like Depew, you can still drive on original Route 66 concrete, laid down in the late 1920s, the very first surface, cracked but enduring. There is one detail here that captures the whole era. Near the hamlet of Warwick stands Sabre Station, a filling station that opened in the 1920s. After the travelers stopped coming, it did not simply close. It survived by repairing engines and even military trucks, all the way into the 1990s before it finally fell silent. A roadside business outliving the road that made it. These towns are not yet fully gone. They are something more haunting. They are dying in slow motion, in plain sight, just off the interstate that killed them. To drive Oklahoma's empty main streets at dusk, past the dark windows and the leaning signs, is to watch a whole way of life dying in slow motion, in plain sight. But just beyond the last of these towns, the trees fall away entirely, and the road runs out onto a tableland so vast and so flat that early travelers feared they would lose themselves in it. The road crosses into Texas, and the world flattens out again. But this is not the green prairie of Illinois. This is the high plains, the Llano Estacado, a tableland so vast and level that early Spanish explorers are said to have driven stakes into the ground just to find their way back. The Texas stretch is short, only about 186 miles, but it feels endless because there is so little to break the horizon, just wind, sky, and the occasional grain elevator standing like a lighthouse on a sea of grass. And it is here, at the very western edge of Texas, that we find one of the most haunting places on the whole road. Glen Rio, a ghost town that sits directly on the Texas-New Mexico border, a town that quite literally grew up in two states at once. In its day, Glen Rio was alive with motels, gas stations and diners, serving the steady stream of motorists. Travelers crossing the line could stand with one foot in each state. Then, in the mid-1970s, Interstate 40 was routed around it. The traffic vanished, the town emptied. Today, the Glen Rio Historic District preserves the old roadbed and 17 abandoned buildings, the bones of a motel, a cafe, a service station, standing open to the wind. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places, it is now protected precisely because it is empty. And just across the line in New Mexico waits its twin, Cuervo, a town that began as a simple water stop for the railroad, grew with the cattle ranches and the highway, and reached a few hundred souls in the 1940s. Its ending was almost cruel. When Interstate 40 was built, it did not go around Cuervo, it went straight through it, splitting the town in two. The homes, the two churches, the old schoolhouse, the abandoned Texaco station, all left behind on either side of the speeding traffic. Two towns, one state line apart, both killed the very same way, by the very same road. The interstate was not just a faster route. For places like these, it was an ending. To stand on the state line at Glen Rio, in the silence the interstate left behind, is to feel how quickly a road can give a town life and then take it all away. But just beyond these empty doorways, the flat plains finally end, and the land begins to rise toward red rock and ancient volcanoes, climbing toward the sky. In New Mexico, the road begins to climb. And as it climbs, everything changes. The light, the color, the very age of the rock beneath the wheels. The high plains give way to the edge of the Colorado Plateau, a vast highland of layered stone that covers much of the American Southwest. This is canyon country in the making. Mesas rise with flat tops and steep red sides. Ancient volcanoes leave black cones scattered across the land. The earth here is painted in iron and rust. New Mexico also hides one of the road's great secrets. For years, the route did not run straight. It made a long northern loop, climbing up to Santa Fe, the oldest capital city in the United States, with its adobe walls and centuries of Spanish and native history layered one on top of another. Then, in the late 1930s, the road was straightened. A more direct line was cut to the west, bypassing Santa Fe entirely and shaving off miles. And so even within Route 66's own lifetime, there were forgotten alignments, old roads abandoned by newer ones. The bypassing did not begin with the interstate. The road had always been leaving pieces of itself behind. This is a land that has watched empires rise and fade. Pueblo peoples built here 1,000 years ago. The Spanish came searching for cities of gold. The railroad followed, then the highway. And each one, in time, became another layer in the rock, another set of ruins waiting in the high desert sun. To follow these abandoned alignments through the high desert is to realize the road was always leaving pieces of itself behind, long before the interstate ever arrived. But just across the Arizona line waits the place where the road's whole story comes to a head, on a mountainside where men tore a fortune out of the rock, and then walked away from everything they had built. There is a town in Arizona that should not exist. It clings to the side of a mountain so steep that its buildings have, over the years, literally slid downhill. Its name is Jerome. The story begins deep in time. The ore that built Jerome formed around 1.75 billion years ago, along a fault in the caldera of an undersea volcano. For most of human history, it lay hidden inside Cleopatra Hill. Then, in 1876, the first mining claims were staked, and the world arrived. What they found was copper, high grade and abundant. The United Verde mine became the largest copper producer in the Arizona territory, and over the decades it would yield staggering wealth, hundreds of millions of dollars pulled from the rock. By the 1920s, Jerome was home to nearly 15,000 people, drawn from more than 30 nations, clinging to a single steep hillside above the valley. It was a wild place. So wild it was once called the wickedest town in the West. The mountain itself fought back. Underground blasting shook the slopes. Buildings cracked. In one famous case, the town jail was knocked loose by a blast and slid more than 200 feet downhill, where it still sits today, far from where it was built. And then it ended. In 1953, the mines closed. About $800 million in copper had been taken from the hills. There was no reason left to stay. The people left almost as fast as they had come, and a town of 15,000 collapsed to barely 50 residents. Jerome had become, almost overnight, one of America's largest ghost towns. It was not alone. Out on the road east of Flagstaff stand the ruins of two guns, perched on the rim of Canyon de Chelly. Once it had a trading post, a gas station, and even a small roadside zoo to lure in travelers. Now it is broken stone above a dry canyon, baking in the sun. This is the heart of the whole journey. A landscape that offered up its buried treasure, drew thousands of people into the desert, and then, when the treasure was gone, let the desert take it all back. But Jerome did not vanish completely. In the 1960s, artists discovered the empty town and moved into its silent buildings. Today, a few hundred people live there again, among galleries and the billion-dollar view, a ghost town that learned slowly how to live again. To stand on Jerome's tilting streets, with the whole valley falling away below, is to feel both the height of the boom and the depth of the silence that followed it. But just beyond these mountains, the road descends into its strangest country of all, a painted land where the desert itself keeps the record of a world that vanished long before any miner arrived. The road now enters a place where time itself is on display. The painted desert. Here the earth is laid bare in bands of red, violet, gray, and white. These colors are not paint, they are the Chelly Formation, layers of mudstone and ash laid down in the late Triassic period, more than 200 million years ago, a time when this baking desert was a humid tropical forest, and the first dinosaurs were just beginning to walk the planet. And the forest itself is still here, not as wood but as stone. The petrified forest holds the fossilized trunks of ancient trees that fell, were buried in river sediment, and over millions of years had their living tissue replaced, cell by cell, with quartz. You can walk among logs of solid rock, glittering with crystal, that were alive before the age of dinosaurs. It is the only national park in America that protects a section of Route 66, a single-century-old road running through 200 million years of stone. From here, the road begins its long descent toward the sea, down off the high plateau and into the harshest country of all, the Mojave Desert. This is the stretch that travelers once feared most. Endless heat, few towns, cars that boiled over and were left at the roadside, and in the middle of it rises something extraordinary. Amboy Crater, a near-perfect volcanic cinder cone surrounded by a black sea of hardened lava. It was the only dead volcano on the entire route, and for that alone, the early travelers stopped to stare. The towns out here are the loneliest of all. A single cafe, a skeletal motel sign, a gas pump rusting in the sun. These are the last forgotten places, the final silences before the road reaches its end. And then at last, the desert breaks. The air turns cool and wet. The land slopes down through the orange groves and the sprawling city, all the way to a pier reaching out over the Pacific Ocean at Santa Monica. This is the end of the line. 2,400 miles from a cold lake in Chicago, the Mother Road simply runs out of continent. We began with a road that runs clear across America, and in the end, it is the road that remains, even where the people have gone. The road was here for less than 60 years before we let it go. A single human lifetime, laid down and then abandoned. The towns that lived and died along it, the copper hills that emptied, the motels that went dark, they are already being quietly reclaimed, by the desert, by the wind, by the silence that closes in when the traffic stops. But the road has not entirely disappeared. It survives in the spaces between the famous places, in the 13 forgotten miles of Kansas, in the split heart of Cuervo, in the sliding streets of Jerome, in a cafe standing alone in the Mojave Desert, waiting for travelers who stopped coming long ago. These are the scenic drives that almost nobody takes anymore. And that is exactly why they still hold the truest version of the story. Drive them slowly. Stop where the pavement cracks and the silence opens up, and you can almost hear it. The engines, the voices, a whole century of people chasing something just over the next horizon. The travelers are gone, but the road remembers everything.